everybody. We are going to get started. My name's Vija Williams, and I am with Place. You might notice that I'm without my lovely co-host, Sarita. She is well, I don't know if I should out her on her. She's on a great vacation, great holiday, and we all wish we were there. I'll just say that. But I am joined today with Kimberlee Meserve, and I've been looking forward to this for a long time. Kimberlee, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I'm a little sad that Sarita's not here, but I'm so excited to do this with you, Vija, because you and I have done something similar to this before.
Yeah. And I am sorry that my lovely co-host is not with us, but she'll be back next week for sure. I think you have an interesting story. Like, I do want to start with your bio before we launch into what we're going to talk about today, which is, of course, how you've taken homebuyer seminars and really made them into a massive lead gen lever. I think that what you've done is kind of institutionalize and systemize them in your process. And I love anything that does that. But in the meanwhile, you grew up as a competitive equestrian competitor and you competed in the world championships. Is that true?
I did. I can't believe you remember that.
It's amazing.
When I was in high school, I was really into horses, and sounds kind of nerdy when I say it like that, but I'm just a very competitive person and I like doing things at a high level. So I convinced my parents to let me go train with these specific trainers. And my mom, bless her, she would tote me all over the country so I could go to different competitions in North Carolina and Kentucky. And it was a really, really cool experience. And it taught me so much of my hard work ethic, because the deal with my parents was that they weren't really going to pay much for it. I had to pay for everything. So I worked my butt off serving at a restaurant, saved all my money, and put all of that towards traveling around to compete.
Sorry, that is amazing. I don't know if you guys all heard that. I just had an alarm go off on my computer and I was like, what is that? That's so cool. And I think that that's what moms do. We support our kids. That's an amazing story. What made you get into real estate? You were pretty young when you got into real estate.
I was, gosh, I feel like I didn't know what else to do is kind of the short answer, but the gist of it is I was working on a job, my first job out of college, and I saved a bunch of money, bought my first house, and I was just really unhappy at this job. I liked the job. I hated my boss. And my real estate agent, so I bought my first house at 24. My real estate agent was the one that was like, hey, have you ever thought about getting into real estate? You'd be really good at this. Because I was obsessively searching listings, sending her stuff. I felt like I knew more about the properties than she did. And she was the one that really guided the way to help me figure out how to get my license. And that's how I ended up at Keller Williams.
Interesting. Fascinating. Thank you for sharing all that. So, let's start with the homebuyer seminars. First time I learned about these, and you and I talked about this, it's fascinating. It was right when COVID started. And up to that point, I know that they were live. You had a really cute name for them. What were they called?
Cruise and Buying.
Cruise and Buying. And you did all of them in person, and then you pivoted to virtual, right? During COVID.
Yeah, we didn't really have a choice. Our area was one of the most conservative in terms of locking down during the pandemic. And it was really hard for us to get back in person. And we have a whole other set of challenges with that now, and just mostly cost. But I had built my whole business for that year around how many seminars I was going to do, because I knew if I do this many, I'm going to get this many leads. This is my conversion rate. It will lead to this many sales. So I really didn't have a choice.
Yeah. And I know we have a slide deck we're going to walk into. Would you mind kind of going into that a little bit? Because I do think it's an interesting history, because we're back to in person, and I know we're going to teach on virtual today, but I think there's a lot people could learn if you just do a quick overview on what you had built until COVID.
Yeah. Do you want me to jump into the slide deck now?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, cool. So, can everybody see this? Thumbs up? Yes. Mm-hmm. Okay, awesome. Yeah. So, well, just a little bit of backstory, and because I think I like to share my story, because sometimes people assume oh, you must have had a book of business or this or that. So I mentioned to you, I got my real estate license when I was 24. I actually was not living in the Boston area at that time. I lived in Southern Maine, and I sold real estate up there for a couple of years. I decided in the end of 2017 to move to an area where I didn't know anybody. So I moved down to the Boston area and I totally rebuilt my business from scratch. I didn't know anybody and I was also single. So I'm now married. But I was going on a lot of dates and I would go on dates with people and like, I'd be like, oh, do you own, do you rent? Like just the real estate agent in me, like always lead generating. And people were like, oh, I rent, like it's way too expensive to buy a house. And I realized that it wasn't necessarily that it was too expensive. It was just, there wasn't enough education or resources for people to understand what it takes to buy a house. And Massachusetts has some great programs. Obviously now today we're faced with a different set of challenges with affordability. I think everywhere in the country is, but at that time, there's a very different market than what we're in today. And I saw this need for just more education around what it takes. We've got things like down payment assistance programs where people can buy with 0% down. First-time homebuyers anywhere for the most part can buy with 3% down conventional. So you don't need that 20%. And our rental market is super, super high here. It's gotten even worse. We're at the point in our rental market where people are getting into bidding wars over rentals. It's like insane.
We've had that in Seattle too. I think a lot of the metropolitan areas have had it.
Yeah, I think you guys have a pretty similar market to us out there in Seattle. And so I just saw this need and I found a really great lender who was young and hungry and new in the business. And we were like, okay, let's just start educating. And that's kind of what I built my whole business on, is this value proposition of providing value to the consumer through the education. So I've actually at this point now done hundreds of first-time homebuyer seminars. And for the first couple of years, it was probably like close to 75% of my business. And then as I've started to grow a team, and we implement different lead gen levers, like everybody knows it's not a very stable stool if you only have one leg, right? So we're a lot more purposeful about adding different lead gen levers. Last year, first-time homebuyer seminars were about 35% of our business. And then this year, it's about 20%. Which actually, interestingly enough, is about in line with the NAR stats. So if you look at the profile of buyers and sellers, I think it was about 30% of transactions on the buy side last year were first-time buyers. And then this year, I think we're probably on track for 20. But I also want to acknowledge kind of the elephant in the room, because I know a lot of markets are struggling with a changing landscape and affordability issues. So the market has changed so much in the last 12 months. And as I was thinking about, having this call coming up, and I'm like, man, it's just so tough for buyers out there. Like, we're still doing the buyer seminars, but what do people want to hear from us? And just kind of a side note, my husband is starting a company right now in the AI space. And so I've been playing around a lot with ChatGPT. And I was like, okay, what are the challenges that first-time home buyers face? I already know this, but it gave me a list of 8 things. And I'm reading through this and I'm like, this is so negative. So it's like first-time buyers face challenges with affordability, down payment, mortgage approval, student loan debt, competition, lack of inventory, maintenance and costs associated with homeownership, and then lack of knowledge and expertise. And I was like, man, this just sounds awful, right? But then I think all of this just comes down to our mindset. And so I was like, okay, well, what are the opportunities that first-time homebuyers have? So I typed my little prompt into ChatGPT, and it gave me another list, and it was also 8 things long. And it talked about there's government programs and assistance, low down payment programs, tax benefits, appreciation and equity building, homebuyer education and counseling, negotiation power, building your credit history, and then the long-term stability. And so I think if this is something that you are considering just as a general value proposition in your business, it all just comes down to the mindset, right? Because it's true that it's going to be less of our business this year, but it doesn't mean that that goes to zero, right? And there's so many benefits to doing these seminars that it outweighs just running away from it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Kimberlee, so with all that said, how many homes did you sell last year? Will you sell this year? And what percentage do you think of that total whole will be buyers versus sellers?
Yeah. So last year, Oh gosh, I don't know that off the top of my head for last year. I just know what it was in volume. This year we'll close as a team about 75 transactions,
Okay.
and we're about 70% buyers. So about 20% of the 75 will be first time home buyers.
Got it. Okay.
So
Thank
whoever's
you.
good at math off the top of their head, I am not.
Yeah.
So I think we have to put ourselves in the shoes of being educators for our clients, because there's so much information out there for them. They don't need us to be the gatekeepers of properties anymore, but there's also like a lot of conflicting information. And I think a lot of times people get the wrong information, especially with social media and TikTok. And so it's our job to give them the correct information. And doing these seminars is going to allow you to establish trust and credibility. And we know that 67% of buyers actually work with the first agent that they meet. So it's giving us an opportunity to insert ourselves into the process as early as possible. You're also just positioning yourself as the expert and the resource to them, no matter where they're at in the stage of buying. And then you can nurture that long-term relationship. So one of the things we do is we give them a book when they attend our seminar, whether it's in person or virtual. So everything that we're talking about today works either way. Like, we really haven't changed the structure of what we're doing. It's just a different platform. And we put all our contact information on there. If they're taking notes, by the time they are ready to buy, if there's some gap there, they're going to go back to that and all our information is there. So we're really purposeful about the branding and about giving them the resources that they're going to want to hang on to.
Yeah, I always say be a better educator than their agent, than everyone else in their life. Like, be the best source of information than anyone else, and then you win.
Yeah, exactly. A fun fact, actually had a client who came to one of our events in 2018, and she didn't buy a house until last year. So it was a lot of nurturing.
Yeah.
And I found out once she started shopping that her mom is a real estate agent in the area.
Wow. That's crazy.
So,
that's crazy. I'd love to be at that.
Told me, and I was like really confused. I'm like, man, you've been wasting my time for a really long time. Like, and she's like, oh, but I don't want to work with my mom. I'm like, great. This is okay. So you just never know, right? So when I mean like giving them that valuable information, there's a really famous like financial guru online, and I'm not going to name any names, but I'm sure some of the people on here probably know who I'm talking about. And it's not Dave Ramsey. And he always talks about like how owning a home is such a bad investment. But I think a lot of times like these arguments that are made are not justified or backed up with information. And I think also as realtors, we tend to make these arguments without the numbers to back it up. So we all know that buying a home is a better investment, right? And if you want to, like, you can message me. I'll tell you the person's name if you want to go look at the comments on Instagram, because it's very entertaining. There's always some type of fight, and then people are like, "You're saying that because you're a realtor," and it's hilarious. But this is something that we give them in the book that they get when they attend. And I think the argument that a lot of times people make is like, well, if you're comparing buying to renting, you're not factoring in things like maintenance, repairs, the long-term cost of owning a home. So my lender actually put this together, and we walked them through an example. So our rent is actually, I think we're number 2 in the nation now. It always fluctuates between 1 and 2 for the most expensive monthly rent for a 1-bedroom. So it's insane to rent here. And so we put together, based on the average rent, what would that payment look like if you were to buy, and how much would that equate to for a purchase price? But the brilliant thing about what my lender has done is he actually lowered it. So this is based on about $4,700 a month. But he included the principal, he included the taxes, he included a budget for maintenance and repairs. So the total of what they're paying with their PITI plus maintenance and repairs comes out to be about the same, slightly less in this example, than it does to spend in rent. And we show them an example of what does it look like over 5 years, because that's kind of the average timeline that a first-time buyer is in a property, because usually after that, they're moving up to the next property. how much appreciation are they getting over that time period based on a very conservative estimate of our area's average appreciation? What are they getting in mortgage pay down versus what would they spend in rent? And it's crazy when you look at the numbers. So in this example, it's about a $208,000 net gain to buy. And if they were to rent, they would spend $316,000 over a 5-year period. So I show you this just to show you guys all how important it is to actually give them the scenarios and the examples and walk them through a sample based on your average rent, because it's really easy for us to say, well, buying is better because taxes, because of this, because of that. But until they actually see the numbers, sometimes it just doesn't connect.
You know what I love about that? I was just looking up the stat, and I know that you know this, and I know that this is a correlation to that, but I'll say it anyway. And this is 2019 numbers, but in 2019, homeowners had in the United States had a median net worth of $255,000, and renters had a net worth of about $6,300, which is I know what you're doing here. What I like about this though, because I've shown that stat before, I like that stat, but this is a little more active.
Yep.
And this is more local to Boston. And so I think I would encourage, as you guys are watching this, think about in your market, what graphics you could do. Your big graphic may not be rent versus own, that may not be the story there, but think about, don't necessarily take this verbatim, but take the idea of this. What Kimberlee's doing is taking the biggest problem and pain point of a buyer in her area, and she's solving it up front, right out of the gate. So think about what's the biggest pain point. It might be down payment. Then you want to focus on, how people get down payments or what that looks like, or down payment assistance or zero down programs or USDA or whatever you have in your area. So what I think what the formula here is, figure out the problem of your target market and tackle the solution head front, like right up front strong.
Yeah, exactly. And I think we're all pretty familiar with that stat that you just shared, Vija. And I think the challenge is that sometimes that's just a little too out there.
I like this a lot
for people. Like it's not, you hear a stat like that and you're like, that's great. Well, how long have they owned the home? Have they been there for 10 years? Blah, blah, blah. Like, how does that apply to me? But when you're able to put things into a very concrete example and show them like, hey, this is what you're paying right now. And if you were paying the same amount, but renting, this is what it looks like over this timeline. And like you said, it doesn't necessarily have to be that buy versus rent conversation, but taking all the things that we know and that we love to share, and just kind of cementing them down into more actionable examples that show people how it applies to them specifically.
Yeah, we're gonna do a webinar. I can't remember when it's scheduled, so I'll hold off announcing the exact one on working with an avatar. And this reminds me, because I've always worked with an avatar where you know exactly who's in your room and you know what they're paying in rent, most likely what the median rent is. And so you're personalizing this. They really probably think you're talking to them, because when you use like the example, okay, if your rent's $4,500, they're like, how did she know? That's probably really close to their rent. And then when you're using another example of a purchase, you're probably giving, because you kind of know their income, you're probably giving a purchase example. That's what they're looking at. And so you've taken a common problem and you've now personalized it to your avatar, to your target market. So I think it's really smart.
That's spot on. So some of my favorite things is the quality of the leads. These clients have actually been some of the best clients that I've worked with, because think of the kind of person that is attending a seminar. It's someone that's a learning mindset. It's someone that's willing to take advice from someone else. And it almost like puts you in the seat of just being the driver for the transaction. Like a lot of times these buyer leads, you've established yourself so early on as being the authority that they're kind of like, hey, you take the reins. This is what we're looking for, but we trust you because you've built that know, like, and trust, where it just leads to a much smoother transaction. So some of the things that we do to attract people to our seminars is we do a lot of Facebook ads, and you can set up a really simple Facebook ad just through like Facebook Ads Manager. We also do a lot of marketing to our existing database, because we have a database of about 12,000 people right now. And a lot of times it's just recycling the leads. Like you'll have, you can have 50 people register, but not all 50 people are going to attend. Usually I find it's about 50% of their registrants will attend. And then from there on, like some will convert into immediate appointments, some into longer term, but just recycling like those older leads that had it registered, maybe didn't attend, or maybe they did attend, but you haven't really talked to them in a couple years. Do they want a refresher? So we do a lot to market to our existing database as well. And one thing that we've been working on implementing a lot more purposefully this year is partnering with local companies. So I've been really active about managing our budget and trying to spend as little as possible on these seminars this year, especially where it is going to be a lower percentage of our business. And I have a client who actually is a property manager for a big commercial building. And I think they have like 30 different tenants of companies in there. And they have actually been trying really hard to get people back into the office because I think the work from home stats is like 60% of people want to work from home and 60% of employers don't want their employees working from home. And so to my client who manages this building, he wants his tenants, who are the companies, to be happy. And so that the companies are happy when the people are coming in and working in the office space that they're paying a lot of money to be in a high rise in downtown Boston. So they've been doing a lot of events and things for the building, for all the different businesses, just to have people have a good experience of coming into work and make them excited to show up. So we actually have partnered with him on doing a couple of different first-time homebuyer seminars at their office common area. It's kind of like they've got a space that's kind of like a WeWork type area there too. And the cool thing about that is, that those people have jobs, because sometimes you'll have people show up that like buying a home is a pipe dream for them, but these people actually have jobs. So it's another level of just a quality lead. So there's a lot of things you can do like that. Promoting them at community centers, church groups. Like, you don't need to spend a lot of money up front on doing these seminars. There are so many things you can do if you get creative. Leveraging.
Okay, I want to drill down a lot here though. And I get that. But I have so many questions. So with that said, on aggregate, like what is your attendance look like? You do them monthly, is that right?
We do them twice a month.
You do them twice a month. Okay.
Yeah, but it's kind of a moving target. I hate to be vague in your answer, but the really interesting thing is we highly monitor our cost per lead. And last year around this time, it was $7 a lead for us to get somebody to register. And our cost has gone up to $40 a lead. So we've been working really hard with the person that runs our ads to like figure out, is it, because we do a lot of Facebook and Instagram, like, is it a Facebook thing? Is it the economy? Like, there's a lot of different moving parts that it just becomes kind of trial and error. Like, let's try this and see if it does anything. Like, let's try that and see if that helps.
Would you say, okay, what would you say would be this is a big one, this particular one, or what would be a small one? What's the range maybe?
So, I mean, it's hard to answer that question because it's not always in the number of attendees. So like when we used to have them in person, I remember one where 35 people showed up and we didn't have a very big space. Like, it was packed. People were like standing. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is so amazing. I didn't convert anybody from that event. Like, it doesn't always matter how big the event is. It's about quality. And ironically enough, the very next month, only 4 people showed up. And I was like, oh man, like, I got lucky. This doesn't work. I don't know what I'm doing. Every single person that showed up turned into a buyer. So it's just about your conversion. And sometimes bigger isn't always better because it doesn't allow you the opportunity to connect with people on a more personal level.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. So, okay. So you're monitoring price per lead. It's definitely, quality over quantity. If you had maybe 5 new buyers, just to pick a number, if you just had 5 new buyers at one, which sounds good to me, if you had 5 people, what might you expect at the end of the day? What would your numbers be then from, who would meet with you afterwards on a one-on-one, and then who would end up buying? You know what I mean? It would be like, is the ratio like 5 to 2, 5 to 1, 5 to 3?
So it's about 50% of registration to attendance And then out of the attendees, about 25% will take action within like the next 6 months.
Okay.
I went back and looked. So we've been really intentional about our long-term nurture. Like I shared, we've had a lot of clients that it was 4 years before they bought. So if I like went all the way back and updated all those numbers, the overall conversion rate would probably end up being higher. And also a lot, like we've had a decent amount that have moved to another area and we've connected them with an agent there for a referral. But I would say if you plan on about a 25% conversion rate, that's pretty conservative.
Yeah, that makes sense. Last question, then we can move on. What might be one example of an ad, a headline or a call to action, or just something like what might be an example of something you'd use to get somebody's attention on an ad?
Yeah. So you want to remember like meet them where they're at. And I think for most people that are taking this step and they're thinking about buying, their biggest concern is the money. And they want to know, like, what can I afford? Like, what do I need to put down? And so one of our most popular ads is usually like something around like, come learn about the special financing programs available to buyers, because we have those. So we have like a down payment assistance program. First-time buyers anywhere can get a lower down payment conventional than a second-time buyer. So no matter really what their income status is, there are first-time buyer benefits. So that's kind of our major hook, is like the special financing available to first-time buyers. And then I'm trying to think of that. That's really been the highest, most performing ad.
Super helpful. Okay, let's keep going.
Yeah, and just the other thing I would add is like, it's not going to work for everybody, because your first one, if you're running an ad, you're not necessarily going to have a picture. But I found that actually having a picture, even if it's like an iPhone picture of an event, like I've sometimes just snapped pictures and used that in our ad. It helps just make it feel like a little bit more real and set you apart from other agents, because I see ads all the time on my feed of other agents hosting seminars. And a lot of times it's just like a graphic or something that it just becomes too common.
That's a good tip. Really good tip. Thank you.
Okay, so I want to give you guys just kind of the outline of the most important 6 steps to putting one of these together. The first thing, and really the most important thing, is to find a good lender to partner with you, and who you partner with matters. I have some great lenders that I work with that are super smart and good at what they do, and I would never consider asking them to do one of these seminars with me, because they have to be able to distill it down in a way it's almost like explain this to me like I'm a first grader. Buyers don't care about all like the nuances of different loan programs. Their concern is, how much money do I need? How good does my credit have to be? And what do I need to do in order to get qualified for a mortgage? So that lender has to be willing to commit to doing these with you, because you want to truly view it as a partnership. And ideally, like, this has to be someone that would be game to do it every month if that's something you want to do, or twice a month. And they're going to partner with you on the follow-up as well. Like, you want that person to be just as invested into it as you are. You want them to be like, hey, so-and-so reached out to me. Like, I know this was an attendee. I'm going to tee them up to talk back to you. Like, you don't want them sending those leads to other agents if they're meeting with the lender first. So the partner is really, really important. I also recommend not to include too many other vendors besides a lender, because it becomes too much. I've had agents come to me being like, I tried one of these and it didn't work. And they had a home inspector, they had a title person, they had a moving company, and it's too much. We need to meet them where they're at, and they're not that far along in the process. They want to know, how do I get financing? What do I need to do? Then you're going to want to decide on a format and a venue. So that's the second step here. And we've done a ton of them in person. We've done a ton of them on Zoom. And I found personally that Zoom is the most cost effective, not only with the cost of like having the event, but my time, because there's a lot less time involved. I can just wear my pajamas, jump on a computer for an hour and a half. Versus like having to drive to the venue, set everything up, and we don't have to pay for a space. So I always recommend to people that the first time they do one of these, do it on Zoom. Like, don't invest a ton of money until you really get your system down and you start to like figure out how exactly you're going to format the whole thing. So that's step number 2.
Hey, Kimberlee, can I just ask a quick question on that?
Yeah, of course.
Have you found any difference in long-term conversion or, has there been any difference in your Zoom people versus in person? Does it take, are the ratios the same with conversion?
It's about the same. We have now struggled to get people in person, actually.
Got it.
And the in-person has presented a different set of challenges than it used to. A lot of the venue spaces around here are so much more expensive than they used to. I think we went through a phase like at the beginning when everything opened up that people wanted to go out, they wanted to be in person, and the world is changing. People are busy. Like everybody's just got a lot going on. And I think it's easier for people to not have to it's not as much of a commitment to do it on Zoom. We've had plenty of super qualified buyers attend the Zoom ones. You just have to be really intentional about how you're presenting and how you're creating engagement. So we set the tone at the very beginning, like this is not going to be passive. We want to make sure that this time is really worth it for you. And we're going to ask you to participate. If you have questions, I'm willing to bet that someone else on this call has the same question. We've heard everything. There are no dumb questions. So I might even call on you and say hey, Via, and I ask you a question. So we have a couple of things throughout the presentation where we have prompts built in. Things like, does anybody know what the minimum credit score is required to buy? Does anybody know what the minimum down payment is? Hey, tell us what brought you here today. What kind of property are you looking for? So we're really, really intentional about creating that engagement during the event.
Makes sense.
I think also to add to that, it doesn't necessarily matter what day, because that's a common question I get. I found that Sundays and Saturdays can work just as well as a weekday evening. I think Mondays are just a tough day for everybody in general. So maybe that is one day I would steer away from. I also wouldn't do it like a Friday evening, right? So just use your logic a little bit. Speaking of avatar, where is your ideal avatar going to be that time? You're not going to have it during a Monday morning when they're going to be at work. So think about that in that capacity, but there's no magic to it. So at the beginning, we did them on Sundays from 11:30 to 1 at a brewery. The reason I did them on Sunday from 11:30 to 1 was because it was the cheapest availability the brewery had. It was not a strategic move. It was a P&L move. So that's something to consider. And I also recommend having a few dates planned out. So commit to 3 or 4 of them to start, because you're going to have people that can't make it for whatever reason. And it's really helpful when I can reach out and say, hey, Via, I missed you at our event the other day. Did you want me to get you information for our next one? Hey, I'm happy to just go ahead and get you registered if that's easier for you. So having those dates in the future are beneficial. Plus, once you do this enough, you're going to start to have clients that become raving fans. They're going to recommend their friends. They're going to ask you when your next seminar is. So having a few of these on the calendar helps.
Yeah, for sure.
The fourth part here is just start your advertising and lead gen. And we talked about that already. Start with low cost, work your existing database already. There's a lot that you can do that doesn't cost money. You want to outline your content and have some type of plan of what you're going to present. We started by originally using a slide deck that was available through KW's online portal called KW Connect. And it was just kind of like my first home. And we took that and later made a book, but you don't need to do that. If you want to just make a quick PowerPoint, that's okay too. I like the book format because it allows them to take notes in it. And it's just printed on 8.5 by 11, but have some type of outline for your seminar content. Work with your lender partner to figure out how's the cadence going to go, who's going to say what, how are you going to transition, and then host your event. And hopefully it's a huge success.
Do you mail the book to them or do they print it? Do you email it to them?
So we emailed the PDF to them. And at first I was like, nobody is going to do this. I have had multiple clients actually print them out, have their notes. During the pandemic, when I would meet with a lot of buyers over Zoom, they would be like, oh, I have my printed out thing. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't.
Well, you can tell what their behavioral style is from that. You could have everybody hold up their book that printed it and they're an S or a C.
Yeah, exactly.
The DIs won't do that. And so, I mean, it's interesting to know which one in the couple is that's awesome. I love that.
Yeah, the high Ds are give me the bullet points here.
Yeah, I'm not going to, yeah, that's perfect. I love that.
So I think the most important thing to all of this is just having a mindset of lead generation. I used to think of these as events and not necessarily so much as the lead generation. And I don't mean just at the event, because you do want to have that lead generation mindset at the event and actually tee up for the appointment. But it's a lot of it is like calling them beforehand. And actually, one of the cool things is we are going to offer everybody the auto plans. I hope it's okay that I'm saying that right now.
Yeah, for sure. Everyone here on the webinar, you can email powerplaybooks@place.com, and we're going to send you the pre and the post auto plans for this, which is a fancy way of saying series of emails. And I don't know if you text, but series of emails that should help get attendance there.
Yeah, so we have plans built out of how we handle the lead when it comes in. We're calling them. We're trying to actually get them to a buyer consultation and not have them attend our event. Like if they're ready to go, why would we delay that, right? If I can meet with you one-on-one to talk exactly about your goals, I want to have a one-on-one conversation with you, not have you in a group setting. So treating it truly like lead generation. And then same with the follow-up. It's going to take some follow-up, a lot of lead nurturing. As I shared before, we've had clients that took 2 or 3 years before they bought. And
for sure,
our goal is to just continue to provide value for them. And then most importantly, it's a long game too. So not only in the follow-up, but I want everybody to think about it this way. If you're inserting yourself in the process of their home ownership journey at the very beginning, and we know that, 67% work with the first agent they meet, and then we continue to follow up after they transact, continue that relationship, they're going to sell again, they're going to buy another place, we can be their agent for life, right? And not only that, they're going to refer us business if we do a really great job and we continue to nurture that relationship. So I don't know what all of your average commissions are in your area, but for us, a first-time home buyer average commission is around $12,000. And so when you do the math here, the average commission per client over the lifetime is about $96,000, give or take. And this is conservative. We've had buyers, of course, that were like $1 million first-time buyers, but just want to give you guys an idea of like, it's not just a long game in the follow-up. It's like a long game in your business and continuing to build your business with quality leads that are going to transact time and time again.
Yeah, I love that so much. I think that as we wrap up today, I think that, all of us can start thinking about what lender partners we can partner with. Because here's the thing, you guys, with the buyer seminar that Kimberlee said, but I just want to put a pin in and emphasize, this has to be done with a lender partner. In a way, they're kind of the most important person in the equation in this case, because the biggest barrier to entry is the finances, right? We all know that. And so, so that's your first domino. And then kind of walking into this, we're going to give you her pre-auto plan, which is really, you should be able to fill this with your database. You can get some friends and family to sit in, so that, you don't have the first one by yourself. And by the way, I would be strategic and make those actual like prospects in your database. Like, hey, would you do me a favor so that people come? Because if they have to sit there and watch you do it, that's not a bad ploy. But with that said, I think you answered all of our audience questions, Kimberlee, and I just want to thank you so much for coming on today, for sharing this. You have a class coming up that I just wanted to be sure that we promote. It's, I believe it's realevents.com that people can get on. Is that right?
Yeah. So if you go to realevents.com, we're actually my partner Ben and I are working on building out a course that is self-paced. You can pay for it. I don't have the pricing yet. We're still in the process of building it, and it will be available come September. But if you go to that realevents.com website now, you can put your information in to get onto the email list to be notified when it's ready. And we're going to walk you through every single step on how to actually put together one of these seminars and execute on it really well.
I love that so much. Well, thank you so much for being with us today. Wanted to also announce something kind of cool that we're doing. We're starting a collaboration with Inman. And what we're going to start doing is doing bonus content, an extra 15 or so minutes that we're going to put on Inman Access. So if any of you are Inman Select members, I believe you get Inman Access. If you're not, you might want to think about it. What Kimberlee and I are going to go do now is drill down on some of this, and we're going to give another 15 minutes of pure gold that's going to go on Inman Access. So that might be something for you to look into. I will come back with a link next week. I don't really have any details on that because I am an Inman Select member, so I just get access to it. But I just wanted to kind of put that bug in everybody's ears. And for everybody else, we always put YouTube replays on our playlist. You can subscribe, and if you registered to this webinar, you'll get the email on that anyway. Thank you, Kimberlee Meserve, and thank you guys all for attending. Have a great day.